Ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to our webinar on drone regulations, first step towards commercial use. As a reminder, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I now hand the conference over to Mr. Leader Disruptive Technologies Practice at Nishith Desai Associates. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aman. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our friends who joined in from various jurisdictions across the world. It's great to have everyone on this webinar. And thank you for joining us to this very interesting and exciting topic, which is the Indian drone story. What we're going to do in today's session is that we're going to give you all a broad landscape in what the law is in relation to drones in India. What are the challenges, if any, implementation, practical, and so forth and so on. And most importantly, what is the road ahead? In addition to that, let me take a minute also to introduce the topic. In visibles, what is the current status when it comes to drones in India? As a lot of y'all would know, till a few years back, flying of drones for civil use was banned. In fact, in 2014, there was a notification which was issued by the government, which expressly banned civil use of drones till further laws and regulations came out. Now, after 2014 till today, there was a lot of back and forth with the industry, with the regulators. There was a lot of positive advocacy which happened, to a certain extent. We as a firm were also part of that. And finally, in August 2018 last year, there was a guidelines which came out, the drone guidelines, the drone law, which was effective December 1, 2018. So the good news, all friends, is that from December 1st, 2018, India has a drone law, which means that you can legitimately fly drones in India for civil use and civil purposes. Taking this introduction, and without further ado, let me introduce my co-panelists and speakers for this session. Prashant Prakhar and Siddharth Rathore. Both are drone experts and they work in the disruptive technology team. They've been advising several clients on drone-related topics. Probably, let me open it with you, Prashant. Based on your experience which you've been having over the past few months and your reading of the law, it would be good if you could tell our participants how does drone 1.0 or car 1.0, which is the drone law in India, look like? Just in general, if you could give some insights, specifically in relation to the process, exemptions, registration process, so forth, so on. Over to you, Prashant.
Sure, thank you so much. So as Hudayfa already mentioned that it was after several years of ban that civil use of drones was finally legalized with effect from December 1st, pursuant to the civil aviation requirements for remotely piloted aircraft, which is popularly called as CAR 1.0. So CAR 1.0 essentially sets out the requirements for obtaining unique identification number for the drones. It also sets out the requirement for taking unmanned aircraft operator permit for conducting drone operations. It sets out certain standards that one needs to keep in mind for training as a pilot for drones. It then also sets out certain standard equipment requirements that a drone manufacturer needs to keep in mind while manufacturing these drones, among the other conditions that the regulation prescribes. There are certain safety and security standards in particular which have been covered in CAR 1.0 that become very important from a drone manufacturer as well as from a drone enthusiast or someone who is taking use of drone in whatever operation that is permitted currently in the CAR 1.0 perspective. One of the important requirements is no permission, no takeoff, wherein unless you have a permission from the mechanism that has been put forth under CAR 1.0 that we'll be discussing subsequently, you cannot take off your drone. There are thresholds for mapping of no drone zones where you cannot operate your drone. There are requirements for inscribing fire-resistant identification plates on your drone, which would have your UIN number on it. Then there are restrictions with respect to sale or disposal of drones, which would require prior permission of DGCA. And then there are conditions similar to this, prescribed under CAR 1.0. Now, under CAR 1.0, drones have been classified into 5 categories depending upon their weight. And weight here would include the weight of the payload as well. Nano being the first category where drones weighing less than 250 grams are covered. Drones between 250 grams to 2 kgs would be categorized as micro drones. Similarly, between 2 kgs to 25 kgs would be called as small drones. Medium would be between 25 kgs to 150 kgs. And any drone above the weight of 150 kg would be classified as large drone. Now, the weight of the drone is the actual determinant based on which it will be determined whether the drone operator or the drone pilot would be eligible for the relaxations that have been set out under CAR 1.0 or not. For instance, nano drones, which are flying below 50 feet in uncontrolled airspace or within an enclosed premises, are exempted from obtaining UIN. Similarly, drones weighing up to micro category flying below 200 feet below 200 feet in uncontrolled airspace or within an enclosed premises are exempted from the requirements of taking the operator permit for conducting drone operations. Besides nano and micro, all drones which are owned and operated by National Technical Research Organization, Aviation Research Center, and Central Intelligence Agencies are also exempted from obtaining UIN. So these are the exemptions that are there with respect to various categories of drones. Now, if one has to procure drones into India, it can either be procured through an Indian manufacturer or it can be imported from outside India, subject to necessary approvals and clearances. Entities that intend to import drones into India, they first of all would require a equipment type approval from the WPC wing of Department of Telecommunications for operating those drones in a D-licensed frequency band. Now, once you have obtained that ETA from the DOT, the importer would then have to obtain an import clearance from DGCA. And thereafter, license would be issued by DGFT for enabling that applicant to import a drone into India, after which the process of obtaining a UIN for that drone would start. Another very important feature of CAR 1.0 is the introduction of digital sky platforms, which facilitates ease of registration and approval processes that one may require to operate drones into India. Now, digital sky platform enables pilots, drone operators, and drone manufacturers to register themselves on the platform and apply for requisite permission and approval that may be required for performing their respective functions. For instance, every flight barring nano drones would be required to take permission via the digital sky platform before it takes off. And every drone operator which has a UAOP license would be required to file its flight plan on the digital sky platform at least 24 hours before the actual operations. So broadly, the focus of CAR 1.0 seems to allow safe operations of drones by hobbies and recreational users. So given that drones cannot be operated beyond visual line of sight under CAR 1.0 and discharge and drop of payloads are also restricted, it is safe to say that the scope of use of drones under CAR 1.0 is limited to hobby and recreational purposes. However, it does provide for an option to seek necessary exemptions, but that is only on a case-to-case basis.
Excellent. So I think this introduction or this summary of CAR 1.0 is very useful, Prashant. Thank you for this. So I think just to sum it up, broadly it has legitimized or legalized the civil use of drones. I think from a structure perspective, you not only require a UIN, which is a unique identification number, but you also need something called as a UAOP, which is a drone permit or a operational permit. And of course, there are broad fence or broad framework which is laid down in terms of what you can do, what you cannot do. And the underlying principle to all of this is that the flight of a drone is limited to the visual line of sight, which means that you can only fly it in daytime. So that's that was a very helpful introduction, Prashant. Everything seems too good to be true. So probably on that note, if I can pass the next question to Siddharth. Siddharth, based on the overview which Prashant gave, in your view, do you think there are any limitations which are there in Car 1.0 or Drone 1.0? Or just any further thoughts on that?
Thanks for that. So the main limitation that, as Prashant touched upon briefly, is one, that foreign entities and the subsidiaries, they are restricted from owning or operating drones in India. They cannot even apply for a UIN. So when you have such severe restrictions on foreign entities, it tends to it reduces the incentive for foreign companies or the international market to look at India as a drone market to invest in. At the same time, there is also a disadvantage to the domestic manufacturers who are still required to obtain an industrial license from the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, because for the moment drones or UAVs, they are defined under defense aircrafts, and whether they are used for civil use or military use, you are still required to obtain an industrial license. So apart from obtaining a UIN or a UAOP, at the very time that you are required to even manufacture the drone, you need this license. So in a way, this is sort of a disadvantage to local manufacturers, because if somebody is importing drones, they would not necessarily need to get this industrial license. The other major limitation is that these car regulations, Car 1.0, they're restricted to only visual line of sight. Even within the visual line of sight, there is no clarity on whether a drone can in fact carry a payload and discharge it. There is a requirement that on a case-to-case basis it can get necessary permissions to do so, but there is no particular framework or regulations put in place for that. The other thing obviously is that there is no requirement for operations beyond visual line of sight, and that also restricts various commercial applications of drones. So these are the main limitations that come across to me.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I think so. Broadly, what from a industry perspective, today a foreign drone manufacturer can sell drones in India, subject to following the import procedure, which is there. The importer will need to follow the import procedure. But the same manufacturer actually cannot incorporate a company in India and actually start selling and manufacturing drones. Because I think this is a very important point which actually lays down that drone in India can only be owned and operated by an Indian or an Indian company which is majority and only owned and controlled by Indians. So I think, these, as pointed out by you, this is very helpful insight. But probably let's also discuss that since the regulations are out since December 1st, it's been nearly 4 months, the government has introduced one-stop clearance for all of this, which is the digital flight platform. Probably I can ask Prashant this question. Prashant, in your view and what you've been seeing, how good has the actual implementation of Car 1.0 been? Just any thoughts or any challenges which the industry is facing?
Sure, so with respect to the challenges that the regulators have been facing with respect to implementation of Car 1.0, it wouldn't be wrong to say that these set of guidelines, they set a very high standard of regulatory framework for civil use of drones in India. And its success highly depends on effective implementations of the introduction that it has made. And one of such significant introduction is of Digital Sky platform. So it can be said that the success of Digital Sky platform would largely decide the fate of how well CAR 1.0 is implemented. And it has been almost 4 months since the launch of Digital Sky platform, and we have yet not been able to use the platform for what it was intended. And I believe that there are several practical challenges that would have to be addressed before the platform could be effectively used. For instance, every drone that is required to obtain a UIN under CAR 1.0 has to be NPNT compliant. However, given the standards of NPNT compliance set out by the DGCA, we understand that most of drone manufacturers in India today are still in the process of becoming fully NPNT compliant. Under the NPNT regime, every flight of drones, barring the nano drone, is required to take permission via the Digital Sky platform before taking off. And such permissions shall be subject to drone flight plan being clear from the no drone zone, which would be mapped on the Digital Sky platform. And now, in order to map those zones, whether they are free zones or whether they are a restricted zone, in other words, whether they are a green zone or a red zone or a yellow zone, the curators of the Digital Sky platform would require data feeds from all parts of the country to make that facility available to the users of the Digital Sky platform, which in itself is a very time-consuming process, and I guess one of the reasons why the Digital Sky platform has not been able to be fully functional today. And even when the data is available from all parts of the country, the threshold prescribed under CAR 1.0 to flag these zones as a red zone or a green zone or an amber zone are such that it practically would make city like New Delhi or Mumbai a no-fly zone for drone operations. Another practical challenge that is faced by several drone enthusiasts is with respect to importing drones into India. While there are ambiguities with respect to providing UIN details at the time of seeking import clearance from the DGCA, when the same cannot be obtained without issuance of import license from the DGFT, which in itself is subject to clearance of the DGCA approval. There are instances where the custom authorities have also been not very receptive when they've come across cases where a drone is being imported to India. Another practical concern is regarding training of drone pilots, where when on the Digital Sky platform, one can register as a pilot only if he or she has a training certificate from a flying training organization approved by DGCA. And one, of course, these flying training organizations are limited in number. Second, these training organizations can impart training only with the help of certain trained officials which have been approved by DGCA, and the number of those officials are also limited. In that case, given the demand of the training requirements and such scarce supply of trainers, is something again that may delay the implementation process for CAR 1.0. In addition to these, there are lacunas with respect to training of law enforcement agencies or anti-drone or counter-drone squads that may be deployed by states to shoot down drones. So all of these aspects are something that still needs to be worked upon for successfully implementing CAR 1.0.
Again, Prashant, these insights are really helpful. So, again, just from a broad macro perspective, what I understand is that, there are not that many limitations in the letter of the law, but to implement something so dynamic and creative such as this, there is still a certain path which needs to be followed from a technology perspective, and ensuring that the government internally is also seen from a technology perspective. And I think your points on the digital sky platform are very valid. And of course, but we still want to accolade the entire thought process of the ministry and the government, whereby they've introduced a unified concept on the digital sky platform, and looking at like a one-stop window digital clearance. But but point well taken in terms of there is still some work to be done at the back end, to get this rolling. Thinking and discussing all of this and hearing both of you guys, probably one question which immediately comes to my mind, and probably Siddharth, this is for you. How optimistic, or what do you think is the vision based on TAR 1.0 which we have right now? Is it that there are too many limitations? Is it that there are too many practical challenges? So overall, what is the sense and feel which you get from what you're hearing and what?
See, the very fact that we're sitting here today and actually discussing and going over the limitations is because we have gone from a situation where there was no law to a situation where there is a law. So, there will be practical issues, there will be lacunae, and there will be like some creases which will require ironing out. But, earlier there was a complete dark area. Now there may be certain grey areas in the interpretation or lacunae, but earlier people did not know what the regulatory framework was. Permissions were granted on a case-to-case basis, it was haphazard, and unfortunately in India you will see that when there are reform measures that are undertaken and new laws that are introduced, the gestation period for the law to settle down usually takes some time. And law such as regulation of drones is no different, and in fact a technology such as this is bound to face its practical hurdles. But the fact that we are able to sit down today and discuss, and actually also given the fact that the government has adopted a consultative approach, and it's raising out a hand to the industry as well as people who are involved in the profession of regulatory work, such as us lawyers as well, is definitely a positive step in the right direction. And it is a fact that India is one of the few countries in the world which actually has a drone regulation in place, and we can spend a lot of time going through the issues and what happens, but this can only lead to something positive in the long run. It may take longer than it should, but I'm quite optimistic of the fact that these regulations have been introduced, and it can only get better from now.
No, I think you nailed it, Siddharth. And I completely agree with you. It is a few years back there was complete darkness where there was a complete ban in terms of flying of drones. Now, at least they've got legitimized. There is a law which says that yes, civilly you can fly them, and this sort of civil use is permitted. And what you and Prashant are rightly saying that yes, there are some issues, but I think the underlying principle still remains that it's up to the industry and the government to work together to iron out these issues. But at a macro perspective, yes, the cherry out here being that it is, civil use is legal. Another interesting development which has happened in this sector, earlier during the year, sometime in January, there was the International Global Aviation Summit, which was held in, India. And the government at that event actually released something which was way beyond expectation, not only domestically but internationally. They have released a consolidated drone roadmap for India. It's like a vision and policy document, which is laying down what the vision and mission of the government vis-a-vis drone in India should be. It is a very interesting drone ecosystem roadmap which is there, which actually talks about flying beyond visual line of sight and a lot of interesting concepts. So probably I'll want to ask Prashant this, that since he was part of the release of the drone ecosystem roadmap at the Global Aviation Summit. What are your thoughts, Prashant, specifically on this roadmap and things where they've talked about commercial use of drones, VVLS, and so forth and so on? Just, what do you think?
Sure, Zephyr. So now, as we already know that with CAR 1.0, and then we should appreciate that government had already laid down the basic framework for regulating civil use of drones in India. And even though the process for implementing CAR 1.0 still is in process, we should again give accolades to the government that it started conceptualizing the future of drones into India, wherein they are thinking of allowing drones to operate beyond visual line of sight and facilitate commercialization of drone industry in India. And as Zephyr mentioned, in order to do that, Ministry of Civil Aviation has released a drone ecosystem policy roadmap earlier in the month of January this year during the first Global Aviation Summit. Now, this new policy seeks to expand the ecosystem for drone operation by promoting development of necessary infrastructure in India. It includes the establishment of a bimodal UAS traffic management system, which will take care of effective management of drone-induced traffic in India. It then also talks about a segregated airspace called drone corridor, wherein the commercial operations of drones would take place. It then recognizes a concept called drone ports, which will facilitate takeoff and landing of drones. Besides this, the policy also proposes some new avenues for digital sky service providers and for foreign investors to be able to invest up to 100% in companies which are engaged in civil aviation services. And by providing or creating these avenues, we expect that there will be significant amount of job creation alongside we'll give a boost to foreign investment that's coming into India. Besides this, well, of course, it is also going to increase the demand of high-skilled IT workforce, which again would lead to creation of more and more jobs. It would also require some trained pilots and drone operators who would be facilitating the services where a drone would be taking off or landing at, essentially creating more job opportunities for drone enthusiasts as well as people who may be thinking of venturing into this sector. Another aspect of the new policy is that it is a forward-looking regulatory framework which envisions autonomous drone operations in India. Under CAR 1.0, drones are allowed to operate only within the visual line of sight and require a human remote pilot to control its operations throughout. Further, drones can only operate during the daylight, as Weber was mentioning, under the 1.0 regime. Whereas the new policy, it not only advocates allowing autonomous operations, but it also pushes the nighttime operations of drones. It also pushes for nighttime operations of drones on a one-time approval basis. So unlike CAR 1.0, where the focus was on enabling safe operations of drones by hobbies and recreational users, this policy yet again is futuristic in approach that sees the value in drone technology and how the same can be harnessed to perform life-saving activities such as transfer of bodily organs or non-living medical products and provide better access to remote locations in cases of natural disasters. So among other commercial activities that may become a reality upon culmination of these proposed policies into regulation someday are discharge of materials for supplementing agricultural irrigation, surveying landscape, active monitoring of rail or road traffic, and then it will also be helpful in surveying or inspecting agricultural land. And to a large extent, it could be used for all such activities which is not specifically restricted under the existing regulation or the regulation that may be proposed in future.
No, I think, thank you again, Prashant, for an overview of the future or the vision document for drones in India. Based on what you've just said, I think this is unbelievable because this actually poises India as a drone leader just from a thought process or from a pioneering perspective. Because I don't think anywhere in the world, there is a policy document which is as consolidated and as holistic such as this, which not only recognizes things like a certificate of airworthiness for a drone to fly, drone ports from where drones can take off and land, drone corridors where drones can fly, drone traffic management systems. I think this is really ambitious and an area of thought leadership from a vision perspective, and that's good to know. But of course, having said that, it's ambitious, it's not yet implemented, so that's where probably a reality check may be required. And on that note, probably I can have Siddharth intervene. Siddharth, hearing from what Prashant just said on the future of the roadmap for drones in India with this policy document, how far do you think this is from reality, and do you see some sort of stumbling blocks, if I may call them, or hurdles, which and how it can be addressed?
Yeah, I think the major stumbling block at the moment right now is CAR 1.0 itself. First, we need to figure out how the regulations as they stand right now, how they are efficiently implemented. This will require coordination between various entities in the government, and as we discussed all the limitations and the practical hurdles, once these are cleared out, I think once we get the basics in place and these baby steps are taken care of, and this basic infrastructure of implementation and execution is put in place, then it will be it will be much easier from there on to progress to, let's say, a CAR 2.0 or even a 3.0. But since this is the first regulation of its kind, and not only the industry players, also the lawyers as well as the implementing agencies in the government, everyone's trying to digest these regulations and figure out how best to implement it. There's also the requirement of necessary adequate investment for the digital sky infrastructure. The other important thing is consumer acceptance. So as we have seen, for example, in the case of driverless cars, people have been talking about for years that it's going to come out next year and so and so. But it only requires one event for people to completely reject that particular new technology. We all know about the incident at the Gatwick airport in London. It all requires, there just needs to be one accident for there to be a complete shutdown. So I think as people on the streets and as consumers, they see more and more drones in the air, and we are already seeing it. I think it won't become such an alien technology or be perceived as such an alien technology. And even if there are some unfortunate mishaps, in time there'll be greater understanding as to why it happened. That we already have a regulation in place to assess why it happened and how it can be improved. So once this basic level understanding, consumer acceptance, as well as necessary coordination between the various players is put in place, then I think there is infinite possibilities ahead of us, because there is obvious economic benefits, there's obvious financial incentives for people to invest here, there is socio-economic benefit. In a country like India, there are various avenues where drones can be used for the betterment of society and also have a very positive impact on the economy. It's just that we need to get past these initial stumbling blocks and these initial hiccups which are bound to happen, and they happen in every field, whether it's GST or any other law. It takes some time to settle down, and this will definitely take some time to settle down. But improving upon it, I think, will not be as difficult as figuring out how this initial creases have to be ironed out.
Yes, so I think again, very valid, insightful, points whereby, Siddharth, I appreciate and agree with the view that it is best to first iron out or, get used to a particular stuff, which is Drone 1.0, kind of get it rolling, get the experiences not only from a user experience, industry experience, but it's also from a government experience. And once people get comfortable, then probably we'll be in a better position to actually implement, the drone roadmap which is there, which is essentially nothing but facilitating commercial use of drones and facilitating flight beyond visual line of sight. But as rightfully pointed out, let's work a little bit on car point one to make it a success, so people actually will have to believe in the car 2.0 which will come in the near future. On that note, and probably the most important and interesting question which everybody is interested internationally is based on what we hear from a roadmap perspective. And probably Prashant, you can add that. What do you see? What is the future for commercialization of drones in India? Where does this go from here?
Sure, Zeta. So to start with, and this is something that everyone will agree, that drone technology has a great potential for commercial applications, and especially in areas such as delivery, logistics, healthcare, and surveying. However, most of these operations are meaningful only if they're conducted beyond the visual line of sight. So the visual line of sight restriction sort of removes the advantages of drones in most commercial applications that require flying drones at night. So while the drone ecosystem roadmap policy envisages to do away with most of these restrictions, it is still in the pipeline and will take some more time before it could be culminated into law. For CAR 2.0 to see the light of the day, the proposed changes would also have to sort of stand the test of public confidence and consumer acceptance. And what I mean by this is that when in your daily life you see drones flying over your head, the idea of absorbing that is something where the consumer acceptance would have to play a role. And once we are accustomed to a lifestyle like that, is something that should give confidence to the regulators also to push for commercializing the operations of drone as soon as they can. Currently, the drone ecosystem policy roadmap is out there for seeking public comment, and the next round of discussions on CAR 2.0 would probably be more effective only after the current framework under CAR 1.0 becomes fully operational, as Siddharth was also mentioning. And therefore, the focus during the next few months is likely to be on making the Digital Sky platform fully operational and plugging the other loopholes which are there in CAR 1.0.
Now, I think that's an excellent summary, Prashant, specifically on the road ahead for drone commercialization in India. Not only commercialization, but even from an operational perspective. And I think the underlying principle, which comes out from this discussion is that there has to be acceptance. It's not limited to a regulatory acceptance, it's not limited to a technology acceptance, but I think it is very important that there is user acceptance. And I think both of y'all, mentioned it in some way that there has to be user acceptance and user experience. And that can probably only happen if, we kind of successfully implement CAR 1.0 and then probably gradually move on to the proposed CAR 2.0. And, I'm sure that will be a success. But on that note, I would also like to, make a positive comment that the overall regulatory approach which is being adopted by the government and ministry is that of a positive one. They're not being very defensive in terms of saying that, there may be one accident or one incident whereby, we will completely not look at a forthcoming or a progressive approach, but we are going to go down that path and see that, it is legitimized, it is legal, and if there is nuisance, there will be ways to tackle it. And I think that's the right approach to have. We should not only boost the domestic manufacturers, the domestic users, international investments, technology advancements, and which ultimately results in a facilitation of a holistic, successful environment. And on that positive note, we would like to conclude, this session, and we would like to open, the line for Q&A.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on the touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. Anyone who wishes to ask a question, they may please press star and 1. First question is from the line of Ujjwal Bakshi from Chase. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Udefa and Prashant. Thank you so much. Listening to you over the last hour or so has been extremely enriching. Thank you for all the insights. I have two questions which stem from the discussions you've just had. One is, of course, I've been following all the good work, all stakeholders, including yourself, have been putting in along with the Ministry of Civil Aviation. But, what has formed up with lately through, the NPNT and the Digital Sky platform, do you think it will be more pragmatic now to take a more happy middle ground approach in terms of practically implementing the car 1.0? Because as we see, and we talk to many operators based in India, or for that matter, even OEMs, they are very wary of NPNT. They are still not sure if 120 days into this, how and where will they be able to, or at what time will they be able to comply with NPNT. So, long story short, is there a more practical approach that we can take towards this one? And second is a very interesting point of which you guys brought out, that the confidence, the consumer confidence, the user confidence, as well as I would like to ask the public confidence also, because if you see how the European Union has been harmonizing their pursuit of harmonizing their airspace, they have gotten down to the whole kinetic energy format of classification, as in how much does a drone weigh and what speed that it is able to gather. And so when it hits somebody, how damaging can it be eventually? So they've gone on to that. FAA then followed suit. So do you think that should be something that we should also look at going forward in the version 2 or 3 or whichever way? Thank you.
So probably let me take a first crack, and Prashant can add to what you just asked. I think, thank you. These are extremely valid questions to point out. I'll answer it in seriatim. The first one which you mentioned, my friend, was can there be a mid approach? Now this becomes very tricky, because once you have a particular law, once you lay down certain specifications, vis-a-vis NPNT, which is nothing but no permission, no takeoff, you would need to appreciate a lot of people are actually moving towards compliances on that front. It's not only domestic manufacturers, but certain players who are also exporting drones to India, or foreign drone companies may already be moving towards that front. And I think what is more important is that the Digital Sky platform is also mapped on the NPNT front. So the mid ground which you're talking, currently, it seems a little difficult, but you never know, right? Because if nobody can comply with it, that will actually defeat the entire purpose of, getting into the system, because then that itself may end up becoming a bottleneck. So to that extent, I feel that let's give it some time and let's see, because informally there was timelines in terms of April where everything was to be rolled out, even on the Digital Sky platform. So let's give the government and the industry clears a few weeks, and probably let's take it from there. And on your second question, in terms of when we further open up the skies for multiple uses, including civil commercial use and flight beyond BBLS, how do you determine liability? And you mentioned kinetic value and energy being one. I think that may become a little challenging, considering where we are at, and as Prashant mentioned, that there's a certain perspective in terms of having various zones in which you can actually fly the zone, which is red, amber, and green zones. And the underlying principle to that is that once you're flying it at a certain height and in a certain region, what is underneath that zone? Do you quantify the enterprise risk or enterprise or value risk, from a human perspective, from a cluster of human perspective, property perspective? I think that will be very difficult, to have a wire media ground with kinetic energy. So the short point being that whenever the proposed law comes out, it may be quite conservative, from an approach perspective, whereby anything underneath which has a minimum risk may be of significant risk. Because I don't think that the government may be very ambitious on that front. And I'll take a pause. And Prashant, if you want to add anything, feel free to go ahead. If not, we can move to the next question.
So therefore, I think you will respond to the question. So I think we can now move on to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is from the line of Mithun Arora from DGI. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I have a question to Prashant. Prashant, you mentioned that law enforcement agencies can shoot down a drone if there is any malfunction or any other activities which is not preferred by DGCA. So I am not able to see anything written on this in Carbon or the roadmap. Could you please elaborate or give some light on this?
Sure, sir. So this is not something that has been laid down specifically in the regulation. However, this is a bottleneck, and it is one of the concerns that have been the reason why the government is so conservative when it comes to giving a free hand to the drone operators or the manufacturers to come out with the kind of equipment that they feel like coming out with. So it was more in the sense that the practical challenges because of which the implementation is taking time, because there is this fear that a drone may go rogue unless we put all the checks and balances in place. So it was more from that perspective.
Oh, okay. By that. Thank you. Thank you, Prashant.
Thank you. A reminder to our participants, anyone who wishes to ask a question at this time, they may please press star and 1. We have the next question from the line of Pradeep Padeli from Thanos. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. So it was very enlightening discussion. One question I wanted to ask was on the front of agricultural spraying specifically. So we are a drone tech company working for the last 3 years and specifically in the area of agricultural spraying. We were actually wondering why, given the safety and the altitude at which these drones fly and the immediate requirement that the agricultural sector has for this kind of an activity, given that along with us there's a handful of other companies, including agricultural companies, who've done extensive testing and there's been quite a few good results. The market is ready, the companies are ready, service providers are ready. Given all this, why hasn't there been a restriction in terms of the policy against agricultural spraying or discharge of these chemicals?
Thanks. So probably, to answer it in simple words, I think there is no specific restriction towards a particular sector. But it's not like the policy, nor does Drone 1.0 or Carbon 1.0 or the roadmap specifically say that spraying of pesticides via drone is illegal or prohibited. So they are not getting into an industry approach because it is impossible from a legal perspective or from a regulatory perspective to focus on a particular industry. The law has to be more holistic and needs to cover as many touch points as it can. So, taking your example in terms of, I'm familiar with other companies who are also, developing similar technologies. In the past, of course, one could always approach the DGCA and, get some specific exemption. Even in the current law, CAR 1.0, there is no blanket prohibition on discharge. It says that it needs to be approved on a case-to-case basis.
So there's one SHU question where they say excursion spraying is not allowed unless specifically cleared. I mean, the way it has been worded seems like this specific application is a bit and also the fact that in the guidelines it says the discharge of chemicals or substances is not allowed. There is that kind of wording, specific wording, right?
Correct. Unless the underlying principle of the guideline is if you read certain sections 3 and 4. They say that case-to-case exemptions can be given. So you would need to make a case in front of the DGC and kind of get it clear. Sorry to interrupt. The technical complication with this specific application was that NPNT and other technologies. I can't speak for everyone, but in general sense, sometimes you don't even find mobile networks and internet availability in agricultural farms. So we were just wondering how NPNT can be actually implemented when we are going for off-city limit and remote area applications, be it agriculture or something else. So that's something on a technological level we saw a challenge. So So I think you can use the benefit of something called 5.3, which is there in the current regulations. I'm sure you would have read about it. But 5.3 is nothing but an enabling provision which gives the flexibility to the Digital Sky platform and the DGCA, which spans the Digital Sky platform, to look at things on a case-to-case basis. The law actually gives that opportunity to you. So you can approach the ministry or the regulator under this particular section of CAR 1.0.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question from the line of Pradeep Pareji from Thanos. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I have a question on the implementation of the policy interface itself in CAR 1.0. Last few months we've been trying to get our drone certified and also get them actually out on the field, but so the Digital Sky platform, a few sections need to be frozen, saying that we are waiting for the manufacturers to comply with NPNT. So we actually haven't been able to get solid information on who exactly is implementing NPNT, how is the firmware and hardware availability, so that manufacturers like us maybe can incorporate if someone else is already using it. And also on the FTOs part, so far none of the FTOs have responded positively about giving the training licenses. We've been constantly in touch. So both these are actually stopping us from commercializing some of our applications. Any information you can provide on that?
I think this is more specific from an operational technical specs perspective. But one thing which we can probably take this offline as well. That we know some other industry players, who are working towards NPNT compliances vis-a-vis the specifications, which some of them have been detailed in CAR 1.0. We can probably, share some details offline and then, help you to see how you can comply with it on the technical front.
Great. So does that mean there's already a process someone can follow to get it registered?
So currently, Pradeep, I think it's solely through the Digital Sky platform. It's transparent to what is there. The platform, what I understand, is going to get more robust in the coming weeks. They are working towards it.
Right. And any info on the FTOs front? So far, none of them have been able to start the certification process. Would you be able to share some info on that? The drone pilot licenses.
That's all WIP.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as no further questions from the participants, I now hand the conference over to Mr. Josefa Tawawala for closing comments. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anmol. Thank you everybody, all our friends who participated. It was really exciting and interesting to hear questions and feedbacks as well. A special thanks to my panelists, Prashant Thakur and Siddharth Rathore, who have given an excellent overview on the overall ecosystem in India. And if any of the audience have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us. I think there is a connect or contact us in the webinar invite itself. And on a closing note, we are tracking this space closely. We are tracking it from not only from a regulatory tax, but also from an industry and user perspective. Be assured that if there is any sort of movement on any front, we will be happy to bring it out there and follow it up with a newsletter or webinar such as these. So stay tuned all. Thank you so much.